I almost didn't go that day. My shift at the hotel started at noon, and I had exactly 40 minutes to kill, so I did what any sensible person does when they find themselves near the Royal Marsden on a Tuesday morning in February. I stood on the pavement outside and pretended I wasn't freezing to death. London in February is a special kind of grey. Not stormy. Not dramatic. Just that flat, worn-out grey that sits on your shoulders like wet wool and makes you wonder what you were thinking moving here from Lyon. The kind of day where everybody walks faster than usual, not because they're busy, but because standing still means feeling it. I had a coffee from the shop on Fulham Road. Paper cup. Both hands. The steam rose and disappeared before it reached my face. And then, everything just stopped. Not the city. The city never stops. But the small pocket of pavement I was standing on, the 3 or 4 of us clustered near the iron fence, we all stopped at the same moment without saying a word to each other. That thing that happens when something enters a space and changes the air pressure of it. A car. Then, another. Dark, long, moving with that particular patience that means someone important is inside. The door opened. I recognized her the way you recognize a song from the first 3 notes. Not because I was looking for her. Because you just know. The shape of the coat, that particular deep blue, the color of the sea right before a storm decides what it wants to be. The posture that wasn't stiff, exactly, but present in a way that most people standing on a pavement are not. Princess Kate. The Princess of Wales, I should say. I still catch myself on that. She wasn't surrounded by the kind of entourage you'd imagine. 2 people. Maybe 3. No fanfare. No announcement. She walked toward the entrance of the hospital the way you'd walk toward anything that mattered, with your chin level and your hands already ready for whatever came next. A small girl, maybe 9 or 10, was standing near the entrance with a woman who I assumed was her mother. The girl had that particular stillness of a child who has learned to wait in hospitals. She'd learned it too young. You could see that in the way she held her own hand. Kate saw her before anyone else did. I watched it happen in real time, the recognition, the recalibration, the way everything else fell away from her attention. She crossed the small distance between them and crouched down, actually crouched down, coat and all, so that her face was level with the girl's face. I couldn't hear what was said. I don't think I was supposed to. The girl looked up at her mother once, that instinctive child check, is this real, am I allowed to feel this, and the mother nodded, and then, the girl said something back to Kate that made Kate laugh. Genuine. Not performed. The kind of laugh that comes out before you can shape it into something polished. The woman next to me, a complete stranger, older, in a yellow scarf, said quietly, more to herself than to me, she remembered what it was to be frightened. I don't know how she knew that. I don't know that she did. But I wrote it down later, on a receipt from the coffee shop, because it felt true in the way that things feel true before you've had time to question them. The Royal Marsden is not a tourist destination. You don't end up on its street unless you're going there, or unless you live nearby, or unless, like me, you're killing 40 minutes and your feet made a decision before your brain caught up. It doesn't have the gravity of the big museums, the wide-open chest of Trafalgar, the theatrical exhaustion of Piccadilly. It has a different weight altogether. It is a place where people come carrying things they didn't choose to carry. I think about that sometimes, how buildings absorb what happens inside them. How you can feel a church even when it's empty, or a school on a Sunday, or a hospital on any day at all. The Royal Marsden had that quality. A kind of held breath. Like the building itself was paying attention. The staff at the entrance had clearly been told, but only just. There was that micro-scramble of people trying to look like they hadn't been micro-scrambling, the straightened lanyards, the second cup of coffee quietly set aside. One nurse, young, maybe a few years younger than me, had a pen tucked behind each ear and didn't appear to notice. She was reading something on a clipboard with the focus of someone who has learned that the work doesn't pause for anything, not even this. Kate walked past her and said something, 2 words, maybe 3, and the nurse looked up from the clipboard and, for a moment, forgot entirely where she was. Then, she laughed. Same as the girl. That unguarded thing. Whatever Kate had said, it was the right thing. There is a particular skill in that, in reading a room of people in various states of exhaustion and anxiety and hope and finding exactly the right frequency to meet them on. Not performing warmth. Not deploying warmth. Just having it ready, like a coat you're already wearing. My coffee had gone cold by then. I didn't notice until much later. I've lived in this city for 3 years. I've seen things on the street that would make your coffee go cold for entirely different reasons. London is not shy about what it is. The beautiful and the brutal share a postcode here without much concern for each other. But this was something else. Later I tried to explain it to my flatmate, Priya, who was eating toast and scrolling her phone and only half listening, which is her natural state. I said, it wasn't performative. That's the thing. It didn't feel like a visit. It felt like she just needed to be there. Priya lowered her phone by 3 centimeters, which, from Priya, is full attention. You think people don't know the difference, she said. I think a lot of people have forgotten the difference, I said. She went back to her phone. But, she put her toast down, which meant she was still thinking about it. There's a word in French, présence, that doesn't fully translate. You can say presence in English, but it comes out flatter. In French it has a specific weight to it, a quality that is almost physical. When someone has it, the room reorganizes itself around them without anyone deciding to reorganize. Kate had it. But, here's what surprised me, and what I keep coming back to. 3 weeks later, sitting in my small kitchen with the same gray February light pressing against the window, the room didn't reorganize around her. It reorganized around them. Around the people she was there for. She somehow managed to have presence without being the center of it. The weight went where it was needed. I'm not sure I've seen that before. I stood on that pavement until long after the car had gone and the staff had stopped straightening their lanyards and the small girl had gone inside with her mother, holding a small something I couldn't see what that she hadn't been holding before. I was 20 minutes late to my shift. My manager asked why and I said, traffic. He nodded. Accepted it. Moved on. I didn't know how to explain that I had been standing on a pavement watching something I didn't have the right word for yet. That I still don't. Presence, maybe. The kind that doesn't take the room. The kind that gives it back. My aunt is a ward nurse. Has been for 22 years. Which means she has the laugh lines and the posture of someone who has held a very great deal together for a very long time, and she is not easily impressed by anything that isn't clinical competence or a really good biscuit. She called me the evening after the visit. She never calls me on a Tuesday. We have a standing arrangement, Sundays, 8 o'clock, 10 minutes if she's tired, 40 if she isn't. Tuesday is a working day and my aunt does not blur her categories. I picked up on the second ring. You'll never guess, she said. She doesn't open with hello. She never has. My mother says it's because she spent years in A&E and pleasantries started to feel like a luxury she couldn't afford. I might, I said. She came down the corridor like it was nothing, my aunt said. Like she'd been down that corridor 100 times. Not nervous. Not performing. Just walking. My aunt paused. She pauses differently from most people. Not because she's uncertain, but because she's making sure the next thing she says is accurate. She went to room 7 first, she said. Mrs. Okonkwo. I don't know Mrs. Okonkwo. I never will. But my aunt told me just enough that she became real to me in the way that strangers can become real when someone who loves them describes them carefully. 63. Retired secondary school teacher. Biology. Her students called her the general because she had a way of standing at the front of a classroom that made you feel both seen and slightly accountable, which is apparently the highest form of teaching. Her family had been coming in shifts since December, sitting in the chair by the window, taking turns. She'd been having a hard week. My aunt said that with a particular quiet that told me exactly how hard. Kate sat with her for 24 minutes. My aunt knows because she checked, not out of officiousness, but because she found herself watching the clock in the way you watch a clock when something is making you want to hold your breath. What happened in that room, what was said, what wasn't said, my aunt doesn't know. The door was left respectfully ajar, as is the protocol, but my aunt kept her distance because she understood, without being told, that proximity would be intrusion. What she saw, from down the corridor, Kate's posture changed when she sat down. That is the detail my aunt kept returning to, because she is a nurse and posture is information. The back straightened less. The shoulders settled. Whatever public geometry she'd been carrying in the hallway, she put it down inside that room like a coat on a hook. She was just a woman sitting beside another woman. That is, I think, the whole of it. Mrs. Okonkwo's daughter, my aunt did meet her, briefly, afterward, was waiting outside the room. Mid-30s, same excellent posture as her mother, red coat that had clearly been put on deliberately that morning because someone was coming and it mattered. She didn't say much. She was holding her own hands again, that particular grip that I'd already begun recognizing as a specific kind of held together. When Kate came out of the room, she spoke to the daughter for a few minutes and my aunt, who was charting at the nurse's station 6 meters away, watched the daughter's shoulders do something they hadn't done in weeks. Drop. Just a centimeter. Maybe less. But my aunt saw it. After 22 years she sees the centimeter things. She told me, it's not that anything changed. The situation's what it is. But sometimes someone just witnesses it. And the witnessing does something. I wrote that down too. I'm running out of receipts. The rest of the visit my aunt described in the way she describes most things, efficiently, precisely, with the occasional detour into something funnier than expected. There was a moment in the family room on the 3rd floor where someone's toddler, who should not technically have been running, was running, and the running toddler collided with Kate's legs at considerable speed and, then, sat down on the floor and looked up at her with an expression of complete betrayal, as though the legs had appeared specifically to ruin his afternoon. Kate looked down at the toddler. The toddler continued his assessment of her, unimpressed. She said something, my aunt heard this one, she said, I know the feeling. The toddler did not respond. He was processing his grievance. But, the mother, who had gone the color of a fire exit sign, laughed so hard she had to sit down. My aunt says she's going to tell that story for the rest of her career. By the time the visit was over, the corridor outside had that particular quality that follows something good, a held warmth, like a room after a party that was actually worth going to. The nurses were getting on with the work, which is what they always do, because the work doesn't pause. But, there was something different in the quality of the getting on. My aunt, who has the vocabulary of someone who has spent 22 years being precise about things, tried for a few seconds to find the word for it and, then, gave up and said, it was like someone had opened a window in winter and, the cold came in, but, the cold was the right kind. I told her that didn't make grammatical sense. She said, no. But, you know what I mean. I did, actually. I do. She asked me, before she hung up, whether I'd heard anything about where the king had been that same day. I said I'd seen something about a sustainability event, a showcase somewhere. Right, she said. Different work. Same crown. Funny how that goes. I said, is it funny? She considered that for a moment. A proper consideration, the kind she gives to things worth considering. No, she said finally. I suppose it isn't. It's just what has to be done. The whole thing has to be done. You need someone at the hospital and someone at the summit. You need someone sitting in room 7 and someone making sure there's a room 7 to sit in. She paused again. People don't think about it like that, she said. They think it's one or the other. The human thing or the structural thing. But, it's always both. Always has been. She rang off after that, because she had a Tuesday morning and I was already using time she didn't have. I sat with the phone in my hand for a while. The February light was doing its usual nothing outside my window. Room 7. 3rd floor. 24 minutes. The centimeter drop of the daughter's shoulders. Some things don't need to be large to be the largest thing in a room. The first thing you notice, if you're paying attention, is the shoes. I was paying attention. That's my job, or near enough. I work in events production, which means I spend most of my professional life noticing the things that other people have decided not to notice. The floor. The sightlines. The precise distance between where the camera is and where the light falls. I was at the sustainability showcase not because of any particular conviction about carbon neutrality, though I have no objection to it, but because we'd been brought in to manage the staging and I had a walkthrough at 9:30. The venue was a converted warehouse in East London. Industrial bones, softened with careful lighting and the kind of reclaimed wood paneling that costs more than the original would ever did. There were exhibitors along both walls, young companies mostly, startups and research teams, the kind of people who have given 3 years of their life to a problem that most people haven't thought about yet. A man from Bristol had driven up at 4 in the morning to show his mycelium insulation panels. A woman not much older than me had a display board about ocean plastic fishing nets being converted into outdoor furniture. She'd set up her own stand at 6 a.m. by herself, and the bolt on one of the legs was slightly loose, and she kept glancing at it with the expression of someone calculating whether to mention it or just hold very still and hope. I fixed the bolt. She said thank you 3 times and then offered me a leaflet, which I took, and which I still have in my coat pocket. This is the context the king walked into. He arrived without the ceremony that people imagine. I'm aware that sounds like something people say to make the story flow, so let me be specific. There was, of course, preparation. Protocol. People had been briefed. There was a route planned and a sequence of introductions and an aide with a discreet earpiece who moved slightly ahead of the group like a ship's prow. But, within all of that, inside the formal scaffolding, the man himself moved differently than I expected. He stopped at the mycelium panels first. Not because it was on the route. The man from Bristol was 2 exhibitors away from the planned starting point, and I watched the subtle recalibration of the aide's expression as the king simply went the way he wanted to go. The Bristol man, I learned his name was Tom, because he said it about 4 times in the first 30 seconds, the way nervous people do, had clearly prepared for a polite 30-second exchange. He had his opening line ready. You could see the opening line on him, in the slight forward lean, the prepared hands. He got 8 minutes. The king asked about the compression method. Then, about the fire rating. Then, about whether the thermal properties held up in a northern European climate versus, he said, somewhere less cooperative, and, he said less cooperative with a particular dryness that made Tom laugh mid-sentence and lose his prepared notes entirely and just start talking. 8 minutes. I watched Tom's posture change around minute 3. The prepared version of himself went somewhere else and the real one, the one who'd driven up at 4 in the morning because he believed in this, came forward. That, I thought, is what you're actually there for. I've been in enough rooms with enough important people to have developed a taxonomy. There are people who perform listening. They've mastered the posture, the slight head tilt, the thoughtful frown, the well-timed nod, but their eyes are somewhere else entirely, already moving to the next thing, the next handshake, the next moment that needs managing. There are people who listen in order to respond, which is slightly better but still fundamentally about themselves. And then, there is this third category, which is rarer and harder to describe and which I've only encountered a handful of times in 15 years, people who listen because the thing being said is genuinely interesting to them, and the interest is not manufactured. It's the eyes. That's how you tell. You cannot fake what the eyes do when something genuinely captures you. His eyes, watching Tom explain the compression method, were doing the real thing. I took a photograph. Not of the king, that wasn't my job and I had the sense to know it. I took a photograph of the loose-bowled woman's display, for continuity records, but, in the background you can see the shape of the 2 of them, Tom with his panels, the king leaning in slightly, and I've looked at that photograph more than makes sense. Something about the geometry of it. 2 people in a room having an actual conversation. It shouldn't be remarkable. But, it was. At one point, a journalist near me, print, I think, or digital, the lines have gone blurry, leaned over and said, almost to himself, he actually knows what he's talking about. Which is not quite the surprise it sounds like. The king has been speaking publicly about the environment since before most of the people in that room were born. Before it was fashionable. Before it was mainstream. At a time when it was, not to put too fine a point on it, broadly considered embarrassing, the eccentric hobby of a man who talked to plants and worried about things that weren't yet worrying. He was right, for a very long time, in an empty room. There is a particular kind of quiet authority that comes from having been right in an empty room. Not the authority of having been important, that's a different and lesser thing. This is the authority of having cared about something before it mattered to care about it, and having continued to care through the years when caring made you look foolish. You can hear it when he speaks. The journalist next to me seemed to hear it too. The loosebolt woman, her name was Amara, I found out later, she does marine bioengineering, she's 29, she has the kind of focused energy that makes you tired and energized at the same time just from proximity, got her moment near the end. She'd been watching the king move around the room with an expression I recognized. The expression of someone calculating probability, revising it, calculating again. When he reached her stand she had her leaflet ready. The same one she'd given me. He took it. Read the front. Flipped it. Read the back. He asked 3 questions, none of which were on the leaflet. She answered the first 2 without hesitation. The third one she paused on, a genuine pause, the kind where something is actually being processed, and then, she said, I don't know yet. That's what the next phase is for. He nodded. Good answer, he said. And meant it. Amara, afterward, found me by the coffee station. She was holding the leaflet she'd already given me, another copy, without seeming to notice she was holding it. Did you see that? She said. I was watching, I said. He wasn't being polite, she said. He was interested. I know. Why does that feel so surprising? She said. She wasn't asking me. She was asking the room. The warehouse. The morning. I didn't answer, because I didn't think the question needed one. It's surprising because we've stopped expecting it. That's the whole answer, really. We've built up enough encounters with the performed version that the real version catches us off guard every time. I left the venue at 11:30, walk-through done, loose bolt fixed, leaflet in pocket. On the tube home I thought about what my aunt had said the night before, about the hospital. About the 2 kinds of work. The human kind and the structural kind. Someone in room 7, and someone in the warehouse. The individual and the systemic. The handheld and the policy-shaped. Neither one enough without the other. Both necessary. Both, when you're watching closely, which is what I do for a living, both unmistakably real. The leaflet is still in my pocket. I keep forgetting to take it out. Or maybe I keep choosing not to. 3 weeks later, Priya found the receipt. The one with my aunt's quote on it. She remembered what it was to be frightened. It had been through the wash at some point and the ink had smeared into something almost but not quite illegible, and Priya was holding it up in the kitchen with the particular expression she wears when she's found something she isn't sure she was supposed to find. Is this yours? She said. Yes. What does it say? I told her. She looked at the receipt for another few seconds. Then, she put it down on the counter, very carefully, as though it might still matter what happened to it. That's a good line, she said. Someone else said it, I said. I just wrote it down. She made tea. I made toast. The February light, 3 weeks on, was exactly the same. Some mornings in London are like that. They don't move. They just sit there, grey and patient, waiting for you to decide what to do with them. I've been thinking about what it means to do the right kind of work. Not in a grand, philosophical way. In the smaller, more practical way that comes from having watched 2 people do 2 very different things on the same day in the same city and feeling, somehow, that you'd witnessed both halves of something whole. I'm not someone who follows royal news. I don't have opinions about the institution, or not informed ones. I have the vague civic understanding of someone who grew up in France and moved to England for reasons that had more to do with a person than a country, and who has stayed for reasons that have more to do with a city than anything else. But, I watched those 2 moments, the hospital entrance, the warehouse, and I kept thinking about the word role. We use it so casually. Her role. His role. As though a role is a container you pour yourself into and the container does the work. What I saw, on that February Tuesday, was something different. The role as a direction. Not a container. A direction you choose to go in, every day, with whatever you actually have, which means some days you go with warmth and some days you go exhausted and some days the going is the only thing you can offer and you offer it anyway. I don't think that's specific to royalty. I think that's specific to any life where the responsibility is for other people's lives. My aunt, 22 years. Room 7, and the one before it, and the one before that. Tom from Bristol, for in the morning, loose bolts and mycelium panels and 3 years of his life given to something he believes in. Amara, 29, not knowing the answer to the third question and saying so, which is its own kind of courage. The direction, every day. That's all it is. That's everything it is. I called my mother that Sunday. 8 o'clock. Her voice had that warm Sunday quality it gets when she's been cooking, which she always is on Sunday. I told her about the hospital visit and the warehouse. About the receipt. About Priya finding it in the wash. My mother listened the way she listens, completely, without interrupting, which is a skill I did not inherit. When I finished she said, "You know what strikes me about what you're describing?" I said, "Tell me." They were both present, she said. Not in the big, obvious way. In the quiet way. Fully there. That's harder than it sounds. I thought about Tom's posture changing at minute 3. The daughter's shoulders dropping a centimeter. Amara, holding a leaflet she'd already given away. Yes, I said. It is. I still have the other receipt. The one with the mycelium leaflet. They've been in the same coat pocket for 3 weeks now, which means, in some sense, they're in conversation with each other, the hospital morning and the warehouse morning, the handheld and the question asked, the individual moment and the larger one. I keep thinking about what the city was doing while all of this was happening. Just being itself. Buses. Coffee. That particular February gray. Tourists on the pavements taking photographs of things that won't matter in a year and will matter in 20. Children learning to wait in hospital corridors. People who drove from Bristol at 4 in the morning. The ordinary ongoing enormous thing of a city. And, inside it, these 2 moments. Unannounced. Unremarkable to anyone who wasn't paying attention. The kind of thing that doesn't make it into the headline above the fold, it ends up in the smaller text, the brief, the secondary story. But, I was on a pavement. I was in a warehouse. I was on the phone to my aunt. And, I am here now, telling you, because I think the secondary stories are sometimes the whole story. The small girl at the Royal Marsden, the one who held her own hand, the one who laughed at something Kate said, the one who went inside holding something she hadn't been holding before, I hope she's alright. I don't know if she is. I have no way of knowing. She's a stranger on a pavement on a Tuesday in February and I'll never know her name. But I wrote her down on a receipt, too. The third one. In my inside pocket. Some people you carry with you even though you don't know them. Even though you only had 30 seconds of them, across a pavement, in the gray. You carry them because the moment was too real to put down. Because it reminded you that everything happening around you, the whole grinding beautiful difficult ordinary thing of other people's lives, is happening. Right now. On some Tuesday. In some February. In some city that never stops. And someone, somewhere, is crouching down to be eye level with it. That matters. It has always mattered. It will keep mattering long after the gray lifts.